Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. Lukium here, and today we're talking about my Apex Predator build for Lepic. Before we get started with the build, here's a quick demonstration for those of you who didn't see the showcase video for the build. First, we have our boy Pyromaniac getting put to sleep. Next, we have a random team doing the Neutralize Void Experiment Special Operation in Hagios, getting a full carry by the build. That's right, with this build, Overkill is your weapon, and it lasts forever.
Wanna race again, buddy?
Thanks, Lepic.
And finally, the build finishes the last wave solo after everyone else quits without barely getting a scratch on. Now, as you can see in the showcase, this build can do mobs, even at very high levels, even solo. It can also take out bosses. So I'm going to talk about each part of the build individually. But really quick before we start, it would be awesome if you would subscribe and drop a like on this video. You could make a huge difference for my channel. So help a brother out if you enjoyed the video. Thanks again. There are two different mobbing setups. One that's a bit more tanky, that focuses a little more on survivability. Another one that focuses more on MP regeneration, that allows you to spam overkill a whole lot more without having to worry about running out of MP. And it's going to be up to you which one works best for you in each scenario. Now, as I start discussing the build, I'm going to be assuming that you've already watched my video on the boss farming Lepic build, which is the base of this build. If you have not seen that video yet, please take a look at that video first. I'm going to have a card above that you can click on and a link in the description. I'm going to be starting with the bossing setup, since this is what you're going to be familiar with. And right off the bat, I will say this is a 10 catalyst build, so it's definitely not for the faint of heart. I did farm for each catalyst individually, and I will say getting catalysts is really not that bad. So to be quite honest, and this might be a little bit controversial, but I think it might actually be worth fully catalyzing a character before starting to work on a different character, because I've had an incredibly difficult time getting energy activator blueprints compared to catalysts. So I don't really think it's that bad of an investment to really put catalysts on a single character, especially if you're able to put a multi-use build together like this one. Or for example, if you're going to drop 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 catalysts on a build that's just for killing bosses, then that's definitely a bit crazy. Now at this point, you should be seeing the setup from the base build that I created before, and we're going to see how we go from there to where we are now. Alright, so let's start first with what stayed the same. We have skill extension is still the exact same thing. We have skill concentration and skill insight. They're reversed from the screenshot, but basically the same thing. Maximize skill is still here. Emergency measures and front lines are still here, although they're in different positions. And the first thing that's different is this spot right here. We actually used a catalyst to replace the M slot with an A slot. The reason for this is that, in my opinion, there is really no good M slot mod that you can run in this setup. So we went ahead and replaced that with an A slot. The next thing that is different is going to be MP accelerant right here. I'm going to say that this is really up to you. I've had about the same results running MP accelerant or maximize duration. With maximized duration, you get a couple more fireballs out, but you lose a little bit of damage when it comes to the damage over time. So it's really going to depend on which boss you're fighting. If it's a boss that kind of stands still more, you may benefit more from running MP accelerant because you're going to be able to get some more DOT on the boss. But if it's a boss that moves a lot, you may be better off running maximized duration so that you can hit the boss with more fireballs. So I'm going to go ahead and ask for the community to give me some feedback on which one overall works better for you. Is it MP accelerant or maximize duration? Just drop a comment below with your opinion. Now, if you're progressing from the base build, there's going to be 3 mods here that are new. We have Tech Specialist, we have Spear and Shield, and we have Dangerous Ambush. If you're working towards this build, your first order of business should be to add Dangerous Ambush because it's going to give you the biggest bang for your buck when it comes to capacity utilization. Now, the first part of the mod is not going to apply, but whenever you get to stagger the boss, you're going to get an additional 49.8% skill power, and that does make a big difference. Then, the next thing that you would want to work on would be to get a level 1 spear and shield. You don't need to level it up at first. The main reason you're putting it on is to get that 8.1% skill power. It may not seem like a lot, but it will make a significant difference to get that additional skill power when it comes to your damage. If you want to get some idea of how that works out, make sure to watch my video on how skill damage works. I'm going to have a card linked above, and it will be in the description as well. Next, you would want to start working into getting Tech Specialist in. This isn't going to give you a whole lot of damage, but in some cases, it will be the difference between taking out a boss or not. The Tech Skill Power modifier here is going to be helping you mainly with your damage over time from Overkill, since the continuous damage on Overkill has such a low modifier to begin with. So we're going from 43.8 skill power modifier to 119.9, which means that your continuous damage is going to be doing almost triple the damage. Then, as you progress the build, one of the very last things you're going to do is going to be catalyzing the sub-attack slot so that you can get the additional 5 capacity, which is going to allow you to increase your spear and shield to give you some more survivability. And then the very last thing that you're going to do is going to be to catalyze the Transcendent slot. Part of the reason why you're going to do this last, and you may not even want to do it at all, is because this is not going to be used on the bossing side of the build. It's mainly for the mobbing side, although it does make a big difference. And yes, this may be a little bit controversial for some, because a lot of you may have followed all the YouTube videos telling you to get Ultimate Lepic and run FIREARM Master, but believe me, that FIREARM Master is going to give you only about half of the benefit of running Tech Specialist. And the benefits that you're going to get from catalyzing this as an R slot far outweigh that benefit. Alright, now to round up the bossing part of the build, I want to talk a little bit about the suggestions that were given by viewers since the first video went out. The first main suggestion that came out was that you can roll in order to cancel the animation at the beginning of Overkill in order to shoot more fireballs. Now, throughout all my testing, while it is true that you can start shooting sooner, I have found that overall you're not going to be able to shoot more fireballs. Either you're going to end up running out of MP anyways, or you would have to switch out one of the mods in order to reduce the MP cost, or you would have to change the external component set so that you don't have that additional 15% MP cost. And then if you do that, you lose the 26.1% skill power, which is going to hurt more than it's going to help. So yes, while it is beneficial to roll so that you can start shooting sooner, I don't think that you actually necessarily gain more damage from doing so. So by all means, do it if you'd like. I don't know if it helps. The other suggestion that was given, which does help, has to do with actually using overclock. In the original video, I said you probably don't want to use overclock because it's going to end up using MP that you're better off using on Overkill. But because you have such a high duration now, you can actually just use overclock while the boss is spawning. And by the time the boss is done spawning, you're still going to have overclock for the duration of Overkill, but your MP is going to be fully recharged by the time you start using Overkill. So let me demonstrate. Say the boss is just starting to spawn now. You hit overclock. Now as you can see, your MP is recharging. Now your MP is almost done recharging. Let's say the boss just finished spawning. You throw in overkill. And now you still have plenty of time to use the entire overkill before overclock runs out. And there you go, overkill just finished, and you still have overclock running. Now, as you probably noticed, while I was going over the bossing part of the build, I actually have 2 mobbing setups, one that I'm calling Tanky and one that I'm calling Spammy. They're mostly the same, but they do have a couple of key differences, so let's go ahead and go over them. At the heart of the build, we're going to be running increased efficiency, which modifies our overkill ability. The main thing that it does is that it makes it to where the ability no longer consumes MP while it's running, meaning that it can technically run forever as long as you don't run out of MP. And anytime you hit a crit of overkill, you actually have a chance to get some MP back. As you can see, it has a 30% chance to return 15% of our max MP anytime we get a crit, and that's what we're going to be aiming for. The spammy setup is actually focused on giving you the maximum amount of damage and the maximum amount of MP so that you can pretty much keep shooting and never run out of MP. In order to achieve this, we're running MP Collector, which gives us a chance to get MP every time we kill an enemy. In order to take full advantage of the crit setup, of course, we're going to be running skill inside, skill concentration, front lines, and emergency measures, which is going to give us 207.7% skill crit chance and crit hit damage, which is the same setup that we have on the bossing side of the build. Next, where with the bossing setup, we were going for maximum duration. We're now going for maximum range. To do that, we're running skill expansion and maximize range. Do keep in mind that if at any point you do need more survivability, you can actually swap the maximized range for amplification control, which does give us 51.7% range instead of the 94.4% range, but it does also give us some shield by 36.5%. That can be a little bit helpful if you're running the Slayer set. Though I personally have never been in a situation where I felt the need to get that additional shield to give me more survivability. Usually everything is just dropping dead so quickly that survivability is not really an issue. This is the reason why for survivability we're only running spear and shield, mainly because it gives us the additional 8.1% skill power despite giving only 89.8% defense, and we're not running a full increase HP because again, most of the time you're just going to be killing things so fast that HP is not really an issue. Finally, in order to maximize kill damage, we're running Fire Specialist in the slot that we ran Tech Specialist in the bossing build. So this is giving us direct skill power instead of skill power modifier. And obviously, we catalyze the sub-attack slot in order to get that additional capacity. One key point that I want to mention here with increased efficiency, as you see, I did not max it out completely. The reason for this is that if you're catalyzing that slot, it's going to give you a 7 capacity cost. And if you put that in a catalyzed slot, it's still only going to cost 4 instead of 3. So there's absolutely no reason to max out increased efficiency and spend the millions of gold and the thousands of Kuiper necessary to level it up. Now, let's switch over to the Tanky setup and see where it's different. As you can see, it's almost the exact same thing. Only 3 mods changed. Number 1, instead of running Spear and Shield, we're running Increased Defense, which is going to give us 160.4% instead of the 89%. Next, we're running HP Collector instead of MP Collector, because again, the point of this is to get a little more survivability. So now instead of having a chance to get MP back every time we kill an enemy, we're guaranteed to get 9% HP back for a 2-second cooldown. Because we have HP Collector on, and because we have the additional defense, I'm only going for level 4 increased HP because that should be more than enough to keep you alive. Again, with this build, things are just dropping dead around you. You're pretty much almost never going to be getting hit. So as long as you're not sitting there letting enemies shoot you over and over and over and over again, you're going to be fine. Which brings us to our external component set. I think that there's going to be mainly 2 different options here. One is going to be the Annihilator set. Now, as you can see here, if I am running the Annihilator set, I have 34,000, almost 35,000 defense and 5,000 HP. But me, personally, I'm a big fan of killing things as fast as possible. So instead, I'll usually run something more like this. As you can see, it's the Slayer set because it gives us that additional 26.1% skill power. And even though you are going to have that additional skill cost of 15%, you're just going to be killing stuff more. And again, when you kill stuff, you have a chance to return MP, and that will typically offset that additional MP cost. Now, you may be saying, Lukium, that's only 17,000 defense and 5,000 health. I'm just going to drop dead. I'm telling you, dude, that's not going to be the case. The footage you saw in the intro, where I'm soloing the last wave of the special operation in Hagios, I was using this setup with Spammy, not Tanky, and I was just barely getting hit and everything was just dying. My personal motto with doing builds is that you should have the least survivability necessary in order to allow you to do the maximum amount of damage to kill everything around you, because dead things can't hurt you. And that's the best survivability, and that's exactly what this build does. Now, to wrap up the external components, let's talk about the perks that you want to look for in them. There are 3 main perks that you're looking for aside from plus MP in the sensor. In the auxiliary power unit, you're going to be looking for MP recovery out of combat, because that's going to help you recover MP in the off chance that you start running low. On the sensor, you're going to be looking for MP recovery in combat, which is also going to help you recover your MP. And finally, on the memory slot, you're going to be looking for MP recovery modifier, which is going to further increase your MP. Because again, in this build, our MP is our ammo, and the one thing you don't want to do is run out of MP. So we are going to aim for increasing our MP as much as possible. Now, keep in mind that if you don't have those stats, that's not the end of the world. I personally don't have a perfect set yet. This here is the set that I'm currently running. So I have HP and fire resistance on this one. I have maximum P and consumable drop rate on this one. And I have defense and electric resistance on this one. So I'm missing all three of the stats that I said you should get. So again, that's just going to make the build better, but it's definitely not a requirement. You do not need a perfect row of almost anything for this build to work. And last but not least, for us to finish with the character screen, let's talk about our reactor here. You're not going to want to be using the exact same reactor on the mobbing side that you would use on the bossing side, because of course, if you're mobbing, you're not killing colossi, so it'd be a waste of a perk to have colossi damage. Instead, you want to trade colossi damage for skill effect range, in my opinion, because as I discussed in my bunny build, when it comes to AoE, range is king. Go check that video if you want to know why. And then for your second stat, either you're going to want fire skill power boost ratio, or you're going to want attack skill power boost ratio, because that's going to increase your damage. Or possibly even better, you're going to want skill critical hit rate. And the reason why you might want critical hit rate instead of direct damage is because the way that our ability now works is that anytime we get a crit, we regenerate MP, and MP is basically our ammo. So it actually gives you two different benefits. It both increases your damage and will help you make sure that the ability is running forever. All right, so now let's go ahead and talk about how the build actually plays, right? So you throw in your overkill, and now that's basically your weapon. As you can see, my MP is not going down, and you will not go down unless I use the ability. So if I go ahead and shoot something, there you go, it got used, but now it starts regenerating right away. But more importantly, as I shoot enemies, it's going to be regenerating as well. So as you can see, as long as I'm hitting stuff, it's pretty much never going to run out of MP, because you're going to be getting crits, and crits give you a chance to restore MP. And what's more, if you're running the spammy side of the build, because we have MP collector, as you kill enemies, that's also going to regenerate your MP. Here in the laboratory, as you can see, I can't kill anything, so you can't even see the benefit of that. So you'll be even better in the field when you're actually killing stuff. Now for how the combat actually goes with the build, I may or may not use overclock. The damage gain that you get there is not super huge. You can use it. It's not going to hurt your MP. But the main thing that I'll usually do is throw the traction grenade. As you're going to see in a moment, it has a devastating range when it comes to pulling enemies in. I'll usually follow it up with a grenade, because the grenade actually has a higher damage on a single hit than the blast from overkill. And then I'll keep blasting with overkill until the grenade recharges, or until the tractor grenade recharges. And then it's just kind of like rinse and repeat. So for a quick demonstration, I'm going to throw a traction grenade actually pretty close to me, so you can see how far you can pull enemies.
Try running from this.
And that's about how the side is going to go with this build. Pull enemies in, blast them with a grenade, blast them with your overkill, and you're basically never going to run out of MP. Now, that was just a demonstration of the range of the traction grenade. I typically wouldn't recommend for you to be pulling enemy right towards you, because of course that's going to give you a higher likelihood of getting shot at. I tried to use the tractor grenade to give me better control over the battlefield, so rather than pulling enemies towards me, I tried to pull them away from me.
Try running from this.
The best way that I can explain what it feels like to play this build is that it's like shooting bunny out of your gun. You point, click, and everything that general direction dies. Now, there's a couple of issues with the build that I want to bring up for everyone, though I personally think that these are more like issues that Nexon needs to fix. So anytime you experience some kind of transition, it's going to pull you out of the ability. So for example, when you're doing a special operation and you hit one of those intermission points where you get to choose whether you want to continue or leave, if you continue, it's going to pull you out of the ability and put you into cooldown, which is pretty annoying. Or if you're doing a dungeon mission or you're doing an outpost mission and you get pulled by a teammate, that's also going to pull you out of the ability. I honestly think that these are things that Nexon needs to change because it's pretty annoying. It was pretty annoying for me using Glay when I'm doing a special operation and it pulls me out of Frenzy and I have to remember to go into Frenzy again, even though it only has a 1-second cooldown. I can't think of any legitimate reason why you would need to pull you out of the ability. So hopefully this is going to be something the Nexon is going to change. And finally, and obviously, you don't want to just be shooting to nothing because you're going to run out of MP and that's going to pull into cooldown as well. So long as you're being mindful of these two things, I personally think that this is probably one of the most powerful builds possible in the game right now. And it has the advantage of being one build that works amazingly both for mobbing and for bossing. And the way it's so hard right now to get energy activators compared to catalysts, I personally think that it's worth the investment to throw in the additional catalysts into Lepic versus trying to start working on a new character if you don't have the activator for that character, and then you only have the catalysts and you're not going to be anywhere near the point to really optimize that character. And with that, we're going to wrap the Apex Predator build for Lepic. Make sure to drop a comment below with any questions, suggestions, or the Descendant that you'd like me to do a build for next. And definitely let me know how the build works for you. Peace out.